So this is not the X-Men reboot that you were looking for.
No, I don't think this is the X-Men reboot anyone on the planet was looking for. There does not appear to be anything approaching a vibe change in this reboot.
I will give you that. It does feel like the foundation of this reboot is everything that's happening in Fall of X, which I think is a terrible idea. But let's get some of the details and get your reaction. Announced during the Future of Marvel Comics panel at South by Southwest, the new X-Men line will be centered around 3 core titles: X-Men by writer Jed McKay and artist Ryan Stegman, Uncanny X-Men by writer Gail Simone and artist David Marquez, and Exceptional X-Men by writer Ewing and artist Carmen Carnero.
This is by far the worst creative lineup for an X launch in history. Let's just say that by no means is this Claremont, Byrne, Lee, Portacio, Nicieza, Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, and Larry Hama over on Wolverine. This does not look like anything approaching that level of talent. I mean, look, David Marquez is a good artist, but when's the last time he did interiors? Ryan Stegman is a great artist. When's the last time he did anything for more than 6 issues? It's not that these are the worst creatives in history.
Come on, Doc, you just said they were the worst creatives.
No, I said this is the worst creators at a launch in history.
Worse than Guggenheim and Colin Bunn?
Yes, Gail's an okay writer. At her peak 15 years ago, 18 years ago, she was, B-list writer. What the hell's she done in the last 15 years? Unless they have a time machine, go back and get 2009 Gail Simone. I'm expecting to see 2021, 2022, and 2023 Gail Simone. And Jed McKay is really only A-list out of complete and utter entropy in Marvel's writing talents. There is no world where he should be writing both Avengers and the lead X-Men title.
We'll get back to that one, Doc, but we do need to talk about these teams. The 3 new X-Men series will see the iconic heroes supporting the struggling mutants while navigating the post-Krakoan world they all live in, with teams focusing on beloved X-Men like Cyclops, Jubilee, Rogue, and Cape Pride. Cyclops' team will consist of heroes like Magneto, Beast, Psylocke, Quentin Quire, Juggernaut, Magic, and Temper. Uncanny X-Men features icons like Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and Jubilee. Their team will discover 4 new mutants. These new characters were created for the series by Gail Simone.
You don't need to add more mutants. We've been doing it for 20 years, and not a single one of them has a memorable personality trait that they've created, except for maybe Dust.
Doc, you've forgotten. There are several characters that are gay.
I don't consider straight a personality trait either, but all right.
Are you excited about having 3 new teams kind of spread out to the abyss? We got 1 in Alaska, 1 in New Orleans, and I guess 1 in Chicago. This concept has certainly worked in X-Men before.
Especially, you had the Outback era where you had the actual X-Men over in Australia, thought dead and working from the shadows. And then you had X Factor, which was the original 5, working out of New York. And this is after they became kind of public and they stopped the initial premise of them being covert mutant hunters. You had the era where they were, you had Gen X up in Boston and the X-Men in Westchester. You've had them when they were operating in Limbo and elsewhere. You've had all the Excalibur teams that have been operating out of the UK. So yeah, this is not the first time they've had them spread out across the globe. And I don't hate that. Although I do feel that completely disconnecting the X-Men from New York is a little bit of a mistake, but not an unfixable one.
Many mutants revealed to be part of these core 3 series have bold new looks, most notably Cyclops, Psylocke, Juggernaut, and Magneto. Juggernaut's intense new black costume permanently cements him as an X-Men hero, even though he's not a mutant or a hero, with his iconic helmet painted with a massive red X, while Magneto is in a floating chair, although it's not revealed if he's confined to this chair or it's just a personal choice. A major win for Beast fans is seeing Hank McCoy looking like the classic bouncing Beast. Juggernaut on the team doesn't make sense. He's not even a mutant. I don't understand why he's fighting with them in Fall of X, and I don't understand why they refuse to acknowledge that Magneto is actually a villain.
None of the people in that office, especially even in that editorial, will admit that Magneto's a villain because, well, they're evil people, and that's what evil people do. They, associate with other evil people. I've heard a lot of criticisms on the new look that, it's a return to the 90s. Oh, it's this nostalgia bait. I don't think it's a return to the 90s. I think it's return to the fucking Kieran Gillen era with Cyclops leading the quote-unquote extinction team. He had a Juggernaut there, which was Colossus. He had a Magneto there. But no, you had a bunch of him with a bunch of villains. And that's what led Cyclops down the path to basically getting turned into friggin' mutant Hitler. And we don't need to see that. We don't need to see morally gray Cyclops that'll do whatever he has to, the ultra pragmatic Cyclops. We had that during the Jason Aaron run. We had that during the Kieran Gillen run. We had that during the Bendis run. The one thing that we can thank Matthew Rosenberg for was bringing back a more normal, traditional Cyclops. And, they've been, trying to get back to the villain Cyclops ever since? Fuck that. I'm tired of it.
Now, you did mention people are complaining that this has 90s vibes. I don't see it. This is what Newsarama said. There's a very 90s X-Men vibe about the entire line. On first blush, with the multiple teams featuring many of the mutants who were most famous and popular back in the X-Men's heyday, along with the actual logos and presentation of the new teams. But they would be so smart to go back to those 90s vibes, because I don't know if people realize this, but the Jim Lee X-Men #1, that's kind of associated with the 90s. That's when the X-Men were big. And we actually had a lot of kick-ass, awesome crossover X-Men events in the 90s. Why are we acting like the X-Men were the bad comic books in the 90s? That was this fucking standout.
God forbid your commercial fucking product is commercially successful, because you made it commercially toxic at this point. So if you need to do stuff to return it back to brand association of when people actually wanted to fucking buy it, by all means do so. Now, these logos, the only one here that it is 90s is Storm. And that's because Storm didn't have a logo until the 90s. Everyone else is 70s or 80s. Wolverine's logo, X-Factor logo, are both the 80s. The NYX logo doesn't look anything like the one NYX title that we had before. In fact, if anything, it's using the font from the XSE title. All the rest of them are 1980s fonts, because that's when they were fucking created.
There's no way Exceptional X-Men ever sees the light of day of a second year. It's not getting past 12 issues, guaranteed to fail. They have no patience for new characters. They put a creator on there that has essentially no enthusiasm around them. The NYX, Nyx, whatever you want to call it, homeless mutant characters, no one cares about that. They are launching out with 9 titles, and at least 3 or 4 of them they know right now are going to fail.
Exceptional X-Men, they have no faith in it. Why? Because the only writer for an X-Men book that wasn't on the stage right there was Eve Ewing. You had C.B. Cebulski, Tom Brevoort, Jed McKay, and Gail Simone, but I didn't see Eve Ewing anywhere there. Talking about things that aren't going to last more than a year, I will dig out and send everyone that's on the Patreon a copy of X-Force #1 from Rob Liefeld if Ryan Stegman and David Marquez last more than 12 issues each on their respective titles. I swear to God, that's how little faith I have in this art team lasting more than 12 issues, and about the same as I have faith in Eve Ewing's Exceptional X-Men lasting more than 12 issues, because Kitty, White Queen, and 3 nobodies that nobody's going to give a shit about does not put any asses in any seats anywhere.
So with the Phoenix book, we know we're getting one of those. Do you think this is Jean Grey Phoenix, or is this Echo Phoenix?
I think it's going to be Jean Grey Phoenix. Look, the Echo show already came, went, and flopped. The push for the character to matter in the comics is over. It was really kind of stillborn to begin with. So they're going to drop it like a goddamn bad habit and go back to something that anyone actually cared to read. And that would be Jean somehow connected to the Phoenix Force.
Now, you did mention Jed McKay. It's also interesting to note that Jed McKay, who will be writing the adjectiveless X-Men book, is also the current writer of Avengers, with Marvel giving no indication that he won't be staying on both. One writer handling both Avengers and X-Men is an extreme rarity in Marvel history, with the most notable example being Stan Lee himself all the way back in the early 60s. Marvel is putting a lot of eggs in the McKay's basket, and with his other ongoing titles, Vengeance of the Moon Knight and Doctor Strange's upcoming summer crossover event Blood Hunt, it does feel like quite a bit much like he's getting Josh Williamson, but he's not even an established talent like Josh Williamson. He has had one good series, Moon Knight.
Yes.
He's got a very unmemorable Avengers going on, a pretty boring Doctor Strange going on right now. He had a terrible Taskmaster. He had a Black Cat series no one cared about. Why are we treating this guy like fucking Jeff Johns?
Because he's the only guy left. Him, the same way that Zeb Wells getting on to Amazing Spider-Man, quote unquote, made sense because he managed to not butcher one significant assignment, actually kind of grow excitement for it. And they're rewarding him by they're promoting him beyond his ability. I kind of don't blame Marvel, mostly because they don't have anyone else. Who else do they have? He is there out of entropy. He's the best of what's left. And
but he's going to be doing
much more.
A 60-issue crossover event, or leading it. Obviously, he's not writing all 60 issues, but he's doing Blood Hunt. He's writing almost every character associated with it besides Spider-Man. So all of his shit's going to be crossing over with it. And he's launching X-Men at the exact same time?
Yeah. A lot of writers that are not named Dan Slott can actually write 3 or 4 scripts in a month. It's really not unheard of you don't have to get Bendis level when you were doing 7 ongoings in a month. But
Bendis was the best-selling writer in the industry at the time.
I understand that, but 4 is not unheard of. And again,
I'm not saying it's unheard of. I'm saying launching a major, a franchise relaunch with X-Men and doing a 60-issue crossover and doing 2 other books that are all going to be tying into this. Give me a fucking break. How about we earn something around here?
Here's the thing. I agree with you completely. The problem is, name me someone else to do it. I think I look at it this way. Jed McKay kind of stepped up for them when everyone else bailed. No one else seemed to want to do Avengers because Jason Aaron fucking butchered that title. Absolutely no one wants to touch X-Men because it's goddamn radioactive after fucking generic Duggan and his cohort of morons and special ed students have what they've done to it. They're not going to pull him off Moon Knight because that seems to be a little bit of a passion project for him. They're rewarding him by letting him stick around on the 2 books that it seems like he actually wants to write, then sticking him in because they don't have anyone else. This is the reason why they had to pull Gail Simone out of the fucking retirement home or, whatever old person's place that she's been spending her life in because she's like 93.
There we go, Doc. So you are not you were not in a good headspace about this reboot. You do not have high hopes for Out of the Ashes.
If this is their legitimate attempt at a relaunch and it's not a placeholder launch like the Rosenberg Uncanny line was and the Age of X-Men event, if it's not a complete placeholder, then this is them dropping the ball harder than I could have ever possibly imagined. The only thing that would have made this worse is if they would have stuck Chris Cant-Rightwell in the place of Jed McKay, because at least Jed McKay has a chance of not butchering it. Gail Simone has a slight chance of trying to do something original. She has incentive to try to regain her stature in the industry, but Eve Ewing, she ain't going to do anything. All the other clowns that they stick on the other books, they ain't going to do anything. And the artists are going to leave inside 12 months. So I have zero hope in this and zero faith.
Now, you and I have been talking about this for about 26 minutes, Doc, but here on YouTube, it should feel like it's about 13 or 14 minutes because we did cut out some key parts and information that Doc provided because YouTube doesn't like extremely long videos. If you would like the unedited version of that, you're going to need to go to Thinking Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description to get the fully unedited version of this conversation, as well as our Black Widow and Hawkeye #1 review, as well as our Q&A, which will happen tomorrow. Definitely check that one out if you want more, Doc.